What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt back here again with Mike Kaye for the latest episode of the No Huddle Show. There was some pretty big news that we needed to unpack. We would have done it sooner, but as you guys are probably aware by now, I covered the Giants, and one of their players decided to go and get arrested, which always happens at the worst times. It's never a good time to get arrested, I guess. But anyway, so we're here now. We wanted to break down Brandon Brooks suffering another Achilles injury, this time on the other Achilles, not the one that he injured against the Saints in 2018. He'll likely miss the whole season. Just off the top, like this, like the first initial reaction is that it's devastating for a guy. I mean, he's going to handle it better than the fan base is because that's the way he's wired. But just devastating for maybe a guy who was the best guard in the NFL last year by most metrics. If you look at Pro Football Focus, he worked back from that injury. He didn't miss a beat. He got hurt again at the end of the year. He was I think he was recovering from that or recovered. Yeah. He looked like he was in amazing shape. If you look at the videos of him doing jiu-jitsu, like he just looks like he's in ridiculous shape. Not even an offensive lineman almost. And then he suffered a torn Achilles when he was working out on the NovaCare practice field. It might have been the first day it opened up or a couple days after it opened up. But what when you heard the news and saw it, and I think Derek Gunn was the first to report, and then Brooks confirmed it. What was your reaction?
Well, it's awful because, he's working with the new strength staff. He's only able to be at the facility because he's injured and he's rehabbing a dislocated shoulder surgery. So to come in when he's in great shape, he's been working, he's been practicing jiu-jitsu in the off season, and he looks like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, he is cut. And so I was talking to Trey Thomas about this, who's his next door neighbor, and he's like, yeah, he was hitting the rehab very hard because that's the only speed he really knows. Like, this is a guy who came back from an Achilles injury in 8 months, which is very, very impressive. Typically, Achilles injuries take roughly 10 months. Which is why we can pretty much rule him out for the rest of the season, even if he makes another miraculous recovery. I also learned that if you tear your Achilles in your right leg, let's say, you're very likely to tear the Achilles in the left leg. I think it's from like a balance standpoint. So,
and I imagine that's especially true for a big guy too, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is the injury that happens to the big guys pretty often nowadays. Jason Peters, I think, has had 2 or 3 of these injuries. But the thing is, he just signed a massive contract extension. Yep. I think it was for like $54.2 million, and he got $30 million in new guaranteed money. So he's kind of protected. He's going to be on the roster probably until 2022, actually, with all the guaranteed money that's protected for injury. And look, he, like you said, thought he was, over the last 3 years, in my opinion, he has been the most complete guard in the entire NFL. By most metrics. I mean, I think Quentin Nelson's maybe the only guy who gives him a run for his money. He's also, I don't want to speak for both of us, but I think he's probably the guy I look forward to talking to in the locker room the most.
Well, yeah, because he talks to you like a person as opposed to like someone who's interviewing him. He'll throw curse words in there, like he just, and you can shoot the breeze with him about basketball. He loves the NBA. Like, yeah, he's for sure a media favorite, which is you can tell who the media favorites are based on the way they react when a guy like him gets hurt. When everybody starts like saying how bad they feel for him, like if it's a guy that they don't love, you don't see as much of like the emotion attached to it.
And I think we like him not just as a player. I think we like him as a person, and I think that's kind of where it comes from too. He's also so transparent, which especially
he tweeted out exactly how it happened. Actually, I'll read the tweet right now before you keep going. He said, I've noticed a lot of people wondering how it happened, so let me be clear. I was doing 60-yard shuttles, and on 7 out of 8, I went to touch the line, push off, and pop. That being said, the work doesn't stop because of an injury. The direction I'll continue to move is forward. All love. And that just like makes me think of the way he was reacting. Like when he came back from that injury and everybody was like how'd you handle that? Like we're blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, what the F am I supposed to do? I'm not going to be woe is me. I'm just going to bust my butt to get back. Like he like just did not understand why anybody would even question him for like the motivation or whatever. But I mean, like he's just wired a different way.
There was just a video posted today that he's already taken
Yeah.
part in jujitsu with a
Yeah.
boot on.
Is
Like the
that
guy's
a great idea? I don't know.
nah, I don't know, but like there was a guy, one of like the well-known like Twitter reporters or whatever, but he's not like an actual reporter. Gave him criticism for skipping out on a game because he had like
Oh
a
god.
bit of an anxiety attack, and said, "I'm not.
Oh
He's
yeah.
lost my All Pro vote, bro." First
Oh
off, you
god.
don't have an All Pro vote. Second, like if you're gonna question this guy's toughness, like or his character or his drive, like Brandon Brooks to me is an All Pro person, and he should have probably been an All Pro player last year. I
Yeah.
thought he
I
played
mean, and also if you remember, that anxiety attack came right after he got the contract because he was putting pressure on himself.
right. I mean, so with that said, let's kind of look at that. Speaking of pressure, the pressure's now on the Eagles to find his
Figure it out.
replacement,
Yeah.
and it's one thing to look for a replacement right guard. It's another thing to replace a Pro Bowl right guard and probably one of the more consistent players on your team. Outside of maybe Jason Kelsey and Carson Wentz, Brandon Brooks was probably the best player on offense.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's the reality of the situation, but they do need to move on. They're actually somewhat lucky that it happened now because then they can get a guy in for a full training camp and let him be that dude.
Yeah, I saw another reporter say this. I forget who it was. It might have been the guys at the Athletic. That like it's not like a devastating loss necessarily. Like the Eagles can still probably achieve what they wanted to, but it puts them like one more offensive line injury from being in like very serious trouble.
Right.
And already, they left tackle is a big question mark right now. And this just adds another question to right guard. Like, so, I know they're high on Matt Pryor. They like that Jack Driscoll kid. To expect a rookie to come in and start is kind of ridiculous, especially at that important position. But I guess unless he has a really, who knows? So we can get into this now. Like the big reaction, like the big immediate reaction was, oh, they're just going to bring Jason Peters back and move him to guard. It's my first reaction was that's ridiculous. I don't see a 38-year-old who has been adamant that he won. I know he's said he's willing to move elsewhere, but I think he's pretty adamant about being a left tackle. And he's probably better than your left tackle currently, so I just don't see how that would check out. I know you talked to a couple experts. Like, what was their thought on like a guy moving from a position he's played his whole career to the opposite side and a different position?
Yeah, I talked to Trey Thomas, who you guys all know was the starting left tackle for over a decade before Jason Peters got here, and he said just from understanding the position, it's very difficult to not only just move to the right side, but then move inside to guard. So you're not only asking him to go from a left-handed stance to a right-handed stance, but you're then asking him to also move inside to guard where you're blocking in an elevator. And this is going to be a very questionable training camp. Like, we don't even know if training camp will start on time. We don't know what the length of training camp will be. We don't know what the practices will be like because of the coronavirus pandemic. You're going to ask a guy who's been a left tackle for 15 years to then move in to not only a different position but a different side of the line, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. We talked to Duke Manyweather, who runs offensive line masterminds with Lane Johnson, that summit that they have out in Texas.
He just trains offensive linemen in general. Like he trained Mekhi Becton coming into the draft, for example.
Right. He also worked with Brandon Brooks as well. So like, I mean, he's probably the one of the more notable offensive line trainers in the country.
Yeah. Based out of Dallas.
Yeah. So I spoke to him and he goes, it's kind of beneath Jason Peters to do this. Like, while he wants to be a team player, to move to right guard, and then you're potentially messing up with your legacy. Like, this guy's better, like you said, better than Andre Dillard at left tackle. Like, at this point, why is he going to take the right guard job when he knows he can do the left tackle job better than the guy that's there? Probably on a pay cut as well.
And they might have been considering Peters to replace Dillard anyway, and so this almost like complicates it because now it would almost make Dillard look even worse that they just didn't trust him enough to like even let him keep that job when they could have moved somewhere. Like he's not going to be the right guard, that's for sure.
Well, and I've seen people do mental gymnastics where they're like, well, Jason Peters could move come and sign and play left guard, and then they can move Isaac
Well,
Seumalo
then
to
you're
right
moving
guard.
everybody. Yeah, that's crazy to me.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, granted, you're doing it before the start of training camp, which is
Yeah.
a little bit better, but like Isaac Seumalo to me is a left guard. He's not a right guard. He's a left
And he
guard or
played
he's a
pretty and he
center.
played pretty well. He finally like settled in last year. Like, don't move him around again.
Right. And, I get it. You have Jason Peters out there to kind of protect Dillard at left guard, but like, I just don't see that. Like, that's just not a smart strategy, in my opinion. The thing is, and I talked to Trey Thomas, I talked to Duke Manyweather about this. All three of us are on board the Matt Pryor train if they do decide to go internal. Jack Driscoll played right tackle at Auburn for the last 2 years. He could probably play right guard. He does project as an interior offensive lineman, but without any field work during the offseason program, and now you're having him come to a training camp of unknowns. It just, like you said, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The kind of the sleeper, the dark horse of the group is Nate Herbig, who's a career right guard at Stanford. Even though he was taught to play center last year, he could be a guy that maybe sneaks up if Matt Pryor doesn't deliver.
Or Suo Peta, who was going to get picked up by another team and they blocked it, so they clearly like him too.
Yeah, he's a guy who played tackle in college, but played guard for the most part during the preseason training camp, and he looked pretty good. We could talk about the outside options. Larry Warford's the guy that everybody wants to talk about. He's been a Pro Bowler the last 3 years, like Brandon Brooks for the Saints. They cut him because they drafted his replacement in
Cesar Ruiz, yeah.
Cesar Ruiz, Jersey boy.
Yeah, New Jersey, Cesar Ruiz.
Yeah, you mean N.J.
Yeah.
So he the outlook for him is still very good. The problem is I don't think the Eagles want to spend the money to bring him in.
Yeah.
He was making $7 million last year. I would guarantee you that they probably don't want to go over $4 million to sign Brooks' replacement. They do like Matt Pryor. Maybe they want to see what Matt Pryor has before they bring in somebody. Ronald Leary's another guy that makes sense. He's got a Rich Gangarello background. Rich Gangarello is obviously their new senior offensive assistant. Had some concussion issues last year, but he started 12 games at right guard. He's sturdy. You know what you're getting in him. Maybe you bring him in to compete with Pryor, and you maybe sign him to like a $2 million deal that's not guaranteed, and maybe you have them compete. There's a guy like Josh Klein, who was the starting right guard for the Vikings last year. He's also a guy that kind of makes sense from a cheap standpoint. I do think they need to bring in a veteran, because if you are going to have Matt Pryor start, you don't really have much behind him as far as experience goes.
Yeah.
You got Herbig, who played maybe a little bit last year. Sua didn't really play. Jordan Mailata, we know, we don't have to say it again. We should. He's never played a meaningful game of football in his life.
Yeah.
They have, Luke Juriga, who they signed, who's a center, an undrafted center. Julian Good-Jones, who's an undrafted center. They're hoping that he can be a Julian Great-Jones. Credit to Bo Wolf from The Athletic for that joke. It's just not optimal. And we talked about it last year. They didn't really have a lot of experience backing up the O-line last year, and they somewhat paid for it when Brooks had his anxiety attack and Lane Johnson went down. But they had Big V, and Big V could move around. They don't have Big V anymore. They don't have a guy who's got that experience and that versatility to kind of move around the line. They are really one injury away from, full-on panic mode. The offensive line can still be good with Matt Pryor right guard. The problem is if Jason Kelce gets injured, or Isaac Seumalo gets injured, or Lane Johnson gets injured, or Andre Dillard doesn't work out, you're screwed. If one of those things happen. So they do need to bring in a veteran, I think. I've been an advocate for a veteran swing tackle behind Andre Dillard to begin with. Now they definitely need a veteran guard to be added to the mix.
Yeah, I think my gut is that they stick with the incumbent guys, but you're right. They at least need to bring in somebody to compete with them to be like a better backup. And then if that guy's not that good, then you just rely on the young guys. I'd say the only reason you would in reality get Larry Warford, I feel like, is if he's only 29. So like in theory, you could sign him and try and keep him around longer than this year and have him as a part of your line for when Brooks comes back, and then you can move Seumalo to be Kelsey's replacement. Like I could see that being like a reasoning, but like you mentioned, like they just don't, especially with the salary cap likely going down next year. I think they could still like maneuver and restructure some contracts, but then it's like you want to roll over as much cap as you can, and if they are burning another $5 million to get a stopgap solution at guard, even if he's a Pro Bowler and maybe he can make a difference. Like I don't know if right guard is the spot you want to do that at. Maybe defensive end would be the one or something like that.
Yeah, and I think, while the league is kind of telling you how they value guys like Jadeveon Clowney and Logan Ryan, the guard market is still pretty thick, you know what I mean? And so like guys are just waiting out to get money. Like if I'm Warford, I don't want a multi-year deal. I want a 1-year deal so I can hit free agency again when I'm 30 and repair my value. But again, like this is a situation where the Eagles need to at least make a move. And Doug Pederson was on WIP on Wednesday morning and essentially said, outside of maybe finding somebody to replace Brooks or somebody to bring into the offensive line, this is probably the roster that they're going to bring in to training camp. He also said that a running back that they wanted slipped through their fingers. I think it's pretty obvious that it was Carlos Hyde, who signed with the Seahawks for a $2.75 million deal. So it was like I had reported several times, they did not want to pay a running back. It also seems like they are not really all that interested in LaShawn McCoy as much as he publicly decrees for them to have a reunion. But speaking of Peterson, I kind of wanted to get in with you on his he did a conference call or I guess a Zoom call the other day is what you would call it. It was a packed house. I got the last question in about Jalen Hurts, who he says that he is he's been pretty impressed by the second round rookie. Press Taylor has him leading virtual huddles, and apparently his ability to recall and recite plays is very, very good. They just want to see.
Are they playing Madden? Is that what that means?
I mean, I didn't really understand what he meant. I'm wondering if it's like the huddle is like all the screens of everybody, and then he has to clap his hands, and then they break off, from the huddle. But apparently he's been doing pretty well there. Another takeaway from a major rookie, first round pick, Jalen Reagor, as I've pretty much assumed the entire time, and we've talked about it several times, he's going to play one position heading into camp. Without the field work this offseason, you kind of want to take baby steps with him. I thought the hype for him was a little kind of ridiculous, so I'd pump the brakes on that. Doug Pederson views him as a guy that is going to probably learn from Deshaun Jackson. Both of them project well as the Z receiver, the receiver who has space before they run, is not going to face press coverage very often. He's the speedster wide receiver. Then he also said, as I've mentioned before, that all of their guys, including Reagor, can move inside to the slot. So they want to see what Reagor can retain and do at that Z position behind Deshaun Jackson, who will be their number one wide receiver if healthy. And then they might move him inside. I think you and I talked about on the last podcast. Look, JJ's going to start at the X position, whether you like it or not. He's the most prototypically sized guy to play that position, the position that Alshon Jeffery plays. And Alshon Jeffery is probably going to start on PUP. Then you have Deshaun Jackson, who's going to start at Z. And then it's going to be either Reagor, Marquise Goodwin, or Greg Ward in the slot. And all three of those guys should receive time anyway. So that's a situation that bears watching. But speaking of Alshon Jeffery, as I go on this rant, Doug Pederson was again adamant that he's going to be part of the plan. He's been taking part in the offseason program, having good conversations with the younger players. I think the Eagles are smart to not tip their hand because you're going to pay him regardless of if you trade him or not. So, and that, by the way, that's the only way this goes down. They're not cutting him. So they're either going to get value or they're going to stick to this guy. And unfortunately, I think the only way you're going to get value is if the Indianapolis Colts are like heavy in the playoff race in the middle of October and Mike Rowe and Frank Reich tell Chris Ballard, hey man, we need this guy. They have plenty of cap space to get it done. Let's just toss, a 6th round pick to the Eagles.
Yeah, I think Jeffrey being his most expendable during a pandemic couldn't have been like worse timing also. Because teams are, if any team was interested in him, they were going to have to get a physical with him. And I guess they could now in theory, but I think his stock has just gotten so low that it almost doesn't make sense but to keep him, because the reality is, I mean, at least on the roster for now or whatever until you maybe release him during the season or something. I don't know, because just the amount of money they'd have to pay for releasing him just isn't worth it, really.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a league record dead money cap hit. It's just not. Like, I just don't see how Aro's been doing that. I also don't think it really pays to do that. You're paying him anyway.
Yeah.
Get some sort of contribution if he's going to be a good trooper. Because believe me, like, he knows that
Hey,
this is.
hey, now he can social distance from all the quarterbacks or
Oh,
whatever.
nice,
So,
nice, well done. But like, here's the thing: like, realistically, if you're Alshon Jeffery and you think this is going to be your last year, and you're getting essentially, a $10 million insurance policy here for your injury, whether you come back or not, you want to put your best foot forward, no pun intended, about his surgically repaired foot.
thanks for explaining the pun to everybody. The people love it when you explain a pun.
Yeah, well, unlike my father, I'm my father's son.
I would hope so. That's good.
Yeah. Well, we haven't taken the test yet, but whatever. Anyway,
He is not the father.
yeah, that'd be weird. I'm 32 now. Like,
You just find that out? Yeah,
yeah.
that'd be tough.
Now that's like an SNL sketch, I feel like. But anyway, my point being is Alshon Jeffery has every reason to have a good season in front of the camera and behind the scenes. Because if he wants to get another big contract or another role somewhere else, or if he wants to stick around here, who knows? He's got to just do right by himself by doing right by the team and his teammates. And it seems like that's what he's doing, according to Doug Pederson. Another interesting takeaway from his conversation was, you know, you and I always like joke about how tight the locker room is at the Novacare complex, and so we're all talking about social distancing. It's impossible to social distance in that locker room, like impossible. Like, unless you go 10 players at a time, and then
Yeah,
even
which
then
is probably what they would have to do, I would imagine, right?
and I don't even know if you could really do that, because doesn't stuff linger in the air too? Like, you're breathing, like, who knows? So anyway, one of the solutions that Doug brought up was practicing over at the Novacare complex, where they have several locker rooms, and all the locker rooms are
You mean
pretty.
at the link? You mean at the link?
What did I say?
You said the Novacare
Yeah,
complex.
sorry, I'm so used to saying that. Yeah, at the link, and it's not gonna. They're not gonna have as much field space, but you can go in the locker room and you have enough distance to where if you put some guys in the visitors locker room, some of the guys maybe in the Temple locker room, I don't know if they use the Eagles locker room too, but like, I'm sure they have at least 3 locker rooms in there, because there's a referee locker room as well. So or maybe guys get changed up in the suites or something, you know what I mean, like something like of
Yeah,
that ilk.
and like jumping off that, like one of the things that I think about is like Doug Peterson's a big motivational speech guy. It's kind of hard to do that if you can't have everybody in the room at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, well, everybody sees when we do press conferences at the Novacare complex, that's also their film room. So,
Yeah.
like, the special teams meetings are in there, and there's absolutely no way you can host, 60 to 90 guys in that room right
Yeah.
now.
I mean, but as I'm sure Doug pointed out, and as all coaches do, they're like, we're not the only ones dealing with this, so everybody's at the same disadvantage at least, which I guess is a positive way to look at it. But I think that's going to be one of the, if whether the season goes all the way through or not, I think that's going to be one of the weirdest parts. Like, it's going to be hard for them to coach guys up,
Yeah,
like they traditionally would, at least.
yeah. I mean, we're trying to stay positive here, but I mean, it's just hard to imagine. There's a chance where journalists aren't able to cover training camp. Like, that.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the situation. And as we get further or closer and closer to July, it's worrisome. I mean, once you get past training camp, like, I would be surprised if all 4 preseason games happen. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Well, wasn't there some talk of them reducing it?
Yeah, to 2, which I think makes sense anyway. And I actually think the league is going to really be paying attention to all of the different stipulations that they have regarding media and the preseason, because it seems like they might want to do that long term anyway, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah. One thing I saw, Albert Breer reported that he said some owners around the league want the season to start in October, like push it back all the way to October. Which, I mean, if you listen to like some of the doctors, it sounds like October might be another wave of positive tests and stuff. So there's just like, again, that's the hard part about talking about, like, we're trying to talk about it as if the season's going to start on time and everything will go according to plan. But, as I reported the other day, there was a call with agents and the NFLPA. And to me, like, just hearing the way they were describing everything, like, I didn't come out of that like conversation I had with some people thinking that, it's like a guarantee that everything's going to go smoothly. They're talking about how they're going to be tested 3 times a week. As the doctor, Tom Mayer, I think his name is, he said that it's a contact disease and a contact sport, which I think is like the most simple way of putting it. Like, football, more than just about any other sport, really. I mean, basketball, they get close together, but it's not as much like contact as football, where in order to do your job, you have to touch another person. And it's not like they're all wearing gloves out there and I'm sure they're going to try and come up with some mass thing. I don't think it's going to work. And like, there's just so many unknown things that all we can do is just pretend like it's going to go according to plan. And then when it doesn't, kind of react from there. But, I don't even know how the season's going to look. And it's kind of hard to imagine. Like, we're going to look back on this year as maybe the strangest NFL history, at least in our lifetime.
Well, it's definitely the strangest year in general life that I've.
Yeah, that's very true. Yes, also the strangest year in general in our life. But yeah, when you like look at, like, because there are going to be weird numbers, there are going to be some weird stats, there's going to be a lot of asterisks on the season. Like, when you look at the encyclopedias about this NFL season and sports in general this year, like, it's just going to be like, man, I remember when that happened? Like, that was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like, you look at what they're doing with the NBA season. Like, I made a joke earlier. Apparently, they're filming like everything in the Orlando bubble, and I'm like, coming in 2040, the first dance,
where it's like just behind the scenes of everything.
Yeah, the 2019-20 New Orleans Pelicans.
That bubble is going to fail miserably, I think. Like, if you just look at the guidelines they sent out, there was things like, you can play ping pong, but don't play doubles, and make sure you're 6 feet apart. And you can play cards, but you have to throw the cards away after you're done. We're going to provide the cards for you. And, we're going to open up some rides, and there's to be some entertainment and some DJs. Like, maybe you guys should have focused on, like, getting through the first 2 weeks before you did all that stuff. Quarantine everybody for 2 weeks where they can't see anybody, and then do all that.
I just, I got nothing. I really do. Like, it's so weird.
I hope it works, as I love the NBA, and the playoffs are always a blast, especially this year where I think it's pretty wide open. But I'm less confident. I'm more confident the NFL starts on time than that the NBA finishes the playoffs, is what I'll say.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a fair bet.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to hit before we wrap up here?
You got me to watch Fleabag on Amazon. You got me to watch Succession on HBO. Good recommendations. I in turn recommend them. Love Life on HBO Max, very good. Anna Kendrick is very good. Good show to watch with your significant other. You'll enjoy it. It's actually very, very like realistic. It's not very Hollywoodized. I actually really appreciated that. So yeah, that's what's going on.
I just finished this show called Rami on Hulu. It's with this comedian. It's about this Muslim American comedian named Rami. Forget his last name in real life. But I would compare it to like a Master of None crossed with like Atlanta. It's just like a really good like slice of life from a guy who has a much different experience than us, and like the things he goes through as a Muslim who's a practicing Muslim, and the struggles of like staying with that, and has some famous actors that appear in it and stuff. But highly recommend that. Only 20 episodes, I believe. So it's a great show. All right, yeah, we can wrap up on that note. As always, make sure you subscribe to Mike's Eagles Extra. He's still sending out some texts on there. Send us some questions. Maybe if nothing crazy happens, we'll do another mailbag soon.
Sounds good to me.
All right, later, guys.